What do you think his regrets might have been if you're speculating at the end of his
I'll
life?
tell you, with fair amount of certainty what I think his biggest regret was that that original band with Dave did not stay together. I think he would have given anything had Dave had it been those four guys for the entire length of the band. Um, I think that was heartbreaking to him. Um, Dave wanted to go do a solo record, and towards the end there, Dave not being in the studio working on pre-production. I talk about that respect thing. That's about the worst thing he could do. Dave's off, we'd say Dave's off climbing a mountain, and he's not in here, working on the record. I don't think Edward could ever forget that. On the other side of that, he always gave Dave all his kudos. Dave was responsible, uh, for the look, a lot of those videos, and he goes, Dave always carried his weight and always came in with the lyrics and melodies. But towards the end there, Dave had that itch, wanted to go do his own solo record. I think Edward building 5150, gave him more fuel to leave the nest, as it were. But I would bet you anything, his biggest regret was that the four of them didn't remain together.
What exactly? That's surprising. What specifically are you basing that on?
Around that time, so that's like what, 1985,
Yep, that's right.
1984.
When you're to approach him to do the book, you're so because that made me wonder. One of the questions I had was you didn't have a front row seat per se, but you were somewhere in the first 20 rows
Right.
for this as this unfolded. And to the public, it was really mystifying. It was like I think the first time, I mean, I was like 12 years old. So, but to me, it was like this sudden out of nowhere seeming thing with this band that's on top of the world all of a sudden makes this drastic change. I'm curious what you were seeing leading up to that because you get on the bus with him prior to the first record even being out.
Yeah.
You meet him in 77 in some June of 77. So
Yeah.
so what did you see? What was your sense of what was going on? And when it happened, how surprised were you?
Good question. So I can remember him telling me as far back as the second record that he was unhappy. And I think I write about that in the book. And it had to do with Dave, a lot of that. And he would talk about being unhappy with Mike. And it didn't have anything to do with Mike's playing at all. It was just his willingness to be a part of the band. And with Dave, it was the same thing. He never said, "Oh, they didn't show up. Oh, they didn't know their parts." It was nothing like that. It was more, I want them to give as much to this band as I do. No one was going to be capable of giving as much to Van Halen as Edward did because he lived and breathed it 24 hours a day. But he just wanted more from them. So as time went on, those problems were exacerbated. And I write about in the book, you know, Mike never called him once to want to come over and jam. And I said, well, or bringing in an idea. And I said, well, maybe Mike's intimidated. He goes, what? Intimidated? It's been 7 years. Get over it. And that's how he thought. Edward didn't think, oh, yeah, you're right. He could be intimidated because I've written all these riffs and I'm this guitar. He didn't think like that. No, he just wanted the effort being made. I don't think it would have mattered what Mike brought in. I'll bet you that Edward would have worked it up into a song. So it didn't have anything to do with the quality of it. It had to do with Mike making the effort. And the same with Dave. Because again, it wasn't the work ethic, because Dave was always there, and when he wasn't, except when he wasn't. But in answer to your question, so '84, the studio gets built, and Dave, I think it made Dave nervous. Dave didn't have as much control because Ted was no longer in the studio all the time with Dave. We're talking about Ted Templeman, who was the
Sure.
producer, who was really there producing Dave. Ted didn't. I mean, Ted didn't really produce Edward. He made suggestions, but so I think that was part of it. but Edward, and again, I write about it, and you can hear it in the audiobook. I don't know how many times he said to me, man, I love Mike. I love Dave. I know, she says, I understand if you change a member, that would be, that would be terrible, a terrible decision to make. He just wanted more from them. So yeah, I'm positive that he wished that band could have stayed together. And what was the second part of your question?
No, that's okay. You know what? I don't even, I'm just going to follow you because I don't, it'll come back to me.
Yeah,
Uh, that's surprising because he wasn't like, according to what you're saying, it wasn't that he was a tyrant and wanted total control. He wanted more input, according to what you're saying, from everyone else. He wasn't the type to be like, no, I want to be completely dominating the writing process. It's no, I want you involved more, which actually also surprises me.
right. No, that's an excellent point. And I think, if anything, I think Edward relinquished too much power. A lot of times I think Edward would take the path of least resistance. When Ed Leffler passes away, who was really the manager who really brought them together, and that's during that, the salad days of their career, and then Ray Daniels comes in. It was like, did you even make an effort to go out and find a manager or talk to managers? I mean, I never asked them that, of course, but it was just like, oh, well, there's a manager here, and Ray was Alex's in-law, relation of some sort. It's like, when they were looking for a singer to replace Dave, he said to me, "Go find me a singer," and he was deadly serious. I'm thinking, Edward Van Halen doesn't have a Rolodex from hell. He could call up Freddie Mercury to come sing on the next record in a heartbeat. I'm exaggerating here. But he didn't, not only did he not want to do it, I don't think he understood how to do it. And I don't mean musically. I just mean, well, I got to call and set up, audition. It just wasn't part of his wiring. He didn't want to be bothered with that.
Who did he say that to?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, who did he say that to? Go find me a singer.
Me.
Oh.
And had I taken him more seriously, I would have found him a singer. I mean, I knew enough people, I would have found him some amazing singer. Maybe a guy who was in a band that had a first record out. I mean, I knew those kinds of people. I thought he was joking.
Right, because I was going to say, how serious do we know he was being, or sarcastic, or, well, you go find me somebody. You know what I mean? Like, I could see that being said in a flippant way.
Yeah. Right. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I thought the same thing. Listen to it on the audio tape, on the audiobook. And I go, he goes, yeah. And then I think there was another time he called me. He goes, have you found me a singer yet? And I'm thinking, my God, is he really that serious? And then how does he find Sammy? Well, the story goes that they both shared the same
right. The car detailing person, like the hot whatever they're
Claudio. Right. That seems to me a little capricious. So had Sammy not gone to the same car dealer, he wouldn't have used Sammy. Then there's talk about way back in the day, because Edward was a big Montrose fan and loved Sammy and Montrose, so he knew about Sammy. So there was that connection. And some people said, I think Ted may have even suggested, well, why don't we get Sammy in the band originally? Well, obviously that didn't work. But I mean, again, it just seemed like, well, yeah, they're both the same mechanic, and Sammy came over and they played, and I remember Edward leaving the message, and that's in the audiobook as well. Hey man, Sammy's voice to my music. Wait till you hear it. So he was really excited about Sammy. And he was really excited about Gary. But that honeymoon period, man, just wore off real quickly.
In both cases, you're saying, yeah.
Both cases. I mean, Gary lasted the one record. Sammy did, I don't know, 3 or 4 records.
4
records. And again, about allowing too much control out of his grasp. Sammy Edward didn't say to Sammy, you're going to be in Van Halen, you cannot do your solo career. or that needs to be put on hold for the time being. And Sammy came out for that with that first solo record. Uh, it was like before the 5150 record or right after. What band could you join that would have allowed you to come out, the new member come out with a solo record? I mean, it's ridiculous. And people said, well, he had contracts with Geffen. I go, fuck contracts. If Van Halen wanted Sammy to, put that solo career on the shelf, he would have put it on the shelf. He didn't. He allowed him to do it. To me, that was insanity. And at one point, Edward even said to me, he goes, yeah, Sammy's coming to the band, but coming out the solo record, man, maybe they think he's just
he played bass on it. Sorry to interrupt you, but Eddie played bass on that
He
record.
did. And I think that was Edward sort of acquiescing to the thing. It's like, all right, I'll play bass on it, It's like at one point he said, yeah, I think people think we just have another blonde singer coming in to do a solo record with Van Halen. To my mind, it was ludicrous, but that's just me. Well,
you're painting a picture of a guy who was able to be singular of focus, and that doesn't, just by definition, it doesn't mesh well with people who have other dimensions in their lives. Not that he wasn't a father and he wasn't into cars and all the other stuff, but he seemed to me like the way you describe him tinkering away at his studio. If that person were born and in their 30s today, might just be totally happy just doing YouTube clips from his garage or something, like guitar. Oh, here, I did this with my guitar and I adjusted this pickup. Like, obviously he had a compositional drive to be a composer too, but I wonder, like with people like that, they don't always make room for other people to be with them in that space, even as they are demanding that other people be with them in that space. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not, even if they had taken him up on it, I'm not sure he would have had the tools to run with them being, okay, fine, we're all in on this with you. I'll help you build 5150. I'll fucking, nail boards in the corner or whatever. I don't know how somebody with that makeup really can deal with that.
I understand what you're saying.